Hello and welcome to the next edition of Unmatched After Action Reports. I'm Sojan and today we have a pretty interesting matchup. It's a trio of Velociraptors up against Medusa and her screech of Harpies on the classic map of Sarpedon. So the Raptors are one of my favorite heroes to play in Unmatched as they reward a very aggressive and fluid playstyle. So playing the Raptors, you are forced to make do with the cards in hand and adapt to the situation, more so than any of the other heroes I feel, with their damage output occurring in sudden big spikes. So Medusa, on the other hand, tends to favor a more controlling type of gameplay. Her goal is to slowly choke you out with card advantage, eventually bleeding or exhausting your hero to death. And any mistakes against her can be fatally punishing, with second shots or her famous or infamous gaze of stones. So we see many of these interactions in the clash of playstyles in today's AAR, so let's get right into it. Start with an okay hand, with the only real weakness being the lack of a small attack. So seeing the makeup of this hand, setting up a decoy, uh, and with a coordinated attack pattern and working things out into as big as an eviscerate on Medusa I can master will be my goal for the first part of the match. Alright, so I take first action maneuver and drew another scheme. I was actually hoping to draw a small attack card such as They Remember or Clever Girl to perhaps open up the option of attacking this Harpy here. Well, with the Raptors, taking small attacks is often a good idea instead of taking too long to sculpt your hand for one long combo chain, which can be easily broken by feint or skirmish, or actually dash in this particular matchup because Medusa doesn't have skirmish. The idea is that even if you don't manage to successfully land a point of damage, at least you are forcing the opponent to use versatile cards to be used for defense rather than offense. So as the Raptors, you have the lowest number of cards available for defense, I think only about 10, among all current unmatched heroes. So the maxim offense is your best defense. It's especially true for the Raptors, as by attacking, you take out potential attacks from the opponent's hand. So drew a scheme, so decided to run away a little bit. And then I took a second draw. And in my mind, because this just drew another scheme, this just meant I had to double down on the biggest eviscerate on Medusa as soon as I can go. So this doubling down on this eviscerate, I mean, the complete do or die complement that I had to accomplish. So note I purposely maneuvered right to the edge of this green zone. The idea is to hopefully bait one of these harpies to attack me, and then I can perhaps decoy into the spot here and do the follow-up with a coordinated attack pattern or working things out. So Medusa's turn actually saw her going for an attack, which was honestly a surprise to me, as she could have just sat strong with a full 7 cards in hand. I mean, eventually the Raptors got to go to you, nested behind a Harpy, so she could have just maneuvered here, surrounded herself with the Harpies, and it would have been very difficult for me to do anything. So I didn't really expect the bait to be taken so early with an attack, but this is what we saw. I mean, one thing was that on hindsight, this Harpy actually moved 4 spaces, but we didn't catch it, so oh well. Alright, and this attack is actually a critical moment in the game. And I'll be going to a bit of deep dive into my options and thought process here. So I already established earlier that with my starting hand and first draws as they were, my main objective would be to land a big eviscerate, hoping to do lethal, solid damage on her, 3 or more at least. So with the Harpies, with this move, unnecessarily leaving Medusa's side, I had exactly the opportunity I needed to exploit. Punish Medusa with a surround that would have otherwise been very difficult to pull off this early in the game with all 3 Harpies on the board. So how successful my Raptors were going to be in this endeavor would likely determine basically the rest of the game for me. The question is, what's the best way for me to use the tools in hand to achieve this outcome? Alright, so the first option was to defend this attack with an Eaten Alive, which would definitely prevent any damage to the Raptor and kill the attacking Harpy yet. Because the highest attack a Harpy could master is a 4 with a Hounds of Zeus. Then on my next turn, I could double working things out. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and try to bring as many raptors to surround her as I can. So I discarded this first option at the time because I wanted to keep at least one working things out as a kind of emergency out. Because it was a very likely scenario of, okay, so let's say if I manage to pull off and eviscerate on her, getting the harpies would be able to trap me inside there, and if I didn't have a working things out, it would be quite problematic for my raptors. So the second option was to use a decoy, which was what I did, and then use coordinated attacking pattern. Uh, so I decoyed. So, I decoyed here. So it's very important that I decoyed here because the idea was that because my decoy triggered first, this would prevent the harpies from this harpy from retreating here and potentially blocking out one of these spaces. So these harpies can retreat, but they leave Medusa totally exposed too. So the third option, which I admit I totally missed during the game, was to still play decoy, but place a raptor here instead. Alright, in the double colored spot. So this would allow a single coordinated attack pattern because that allows you to place all your raptors in corresponding zones. So I could actually place one here in the purple, in the pink and yellow zone. So this means that I didn't need to burn or working things out, and yet I could still bring 2 raptors there. So I wouldn't get a full surround, but perhaps 1 lesser damage now for 1 more working things out for use in the future was a fair trade. But anyway, this wasn't what I did, and what actually happened in game was that I took option 2, and it was a bit of a screw up for me as I meant to execute what I actually laid out in my option 2 earlier. But somehow in this game, after I decoyed in my next turn, so I used a coordinated attack pattern. That was the right idea. But I accidentally maneuvered. Okay, so I just maneuvered, and that was a total mistake. Because thought yeah, I was supposed to be working things out. So thankfully my opponent allowed a take back for my very obvious mistake, so I quickly fixed it. Alright, and here comes the eviscerate into a dash. So 7 points against 3. Got 4 points of damage through, which was pretty solid. That's 25% of Medusa's health. There was no healing for her. Now I just have to minimize the counter attack from Medusa, especially since I only had 1 defense card in hand. So next turn, she opened with an attack on the Harpy. With an attack on the green raptor with a Harpy. So I was actually debating in my mind whether to defend this. Pretty good option again. If I defended this, I would be able to kill off this Harpy with the Eaten Alive. But I actually decided not to. So it was another Hounds of Zeus, and I took a solid 4 damage here. And then Medusa, thinking I had no defense cards in hand, tried to Gaze of Stone this one, but I managed to Eaten Alive. So that was the main reason why I didn't want to defend against this attack from the Harpy also. If it was an attack from Medusa, I was definitely going to do a Gaze of Stone. But this also meant that Medusa didn't have any other attack cards in hand for her. So this dealt another point of damage to Medusa. So next turn, I maneuvered, drew They Remember, which on hindsight, I actually should have just attacked with, considering that she only had 2 cards left in hand. The risk was that if Medusa somehow had a feint in hand, that would cancel my action, and I wouldn't be able to maneuver out into the red zone. Means that the green raptor will just die to the auto damage from her. So next couple of turns, just me trying to escape from this trap. Alright, and with working things out. For emergency, I tried to run away as much as I could. So place this guy here, hoping Medusa would come out here. So she came out here. I was hoping that I would build a decoy and surround her. But nah, Medusa's smart enough. On the turn she moved here and attacked this dinosaur. So really wish I had a feint or something in hand. But nah, only had a decoy. So with the second shot, this deals a solid 4 points of damage on the blue raptor. Hey, but this allows me to pop up behind the behind Medusa. And this when I try to beat out some of her versatile cards. But I have no idea why I attacked the Harpy first. Because I mean I had to take into account the possibility of clutching claws, which would force me to discard a card. So if I just attack Medusa, I will be able to at least pull off double Day Remembers. Anyway, Medusa had a feint in hand. And with the last pack hunters, we only had a regroup, so I dealt some pretty solid damage. It's down to 7 health. Alright, so with regroup, he actually drew another feint, which she used to kill off this blue one. So she dealt a point of auto damage to the blue one and finished it off with a feint. Drew another card. Thankfully wasn't an attack. So my turn, I just ran away, drew another feint and eviscerate. So next couple of turns will allow as we both tried to drop to 7. But here, without working things out or calling it attack pattern, I had to slowly munch through some harpies in order to get some hits onto Medusa. Discarded a feint here though. Hate discarding feint against Medusa because I think that's the my best defense. So that would totally counter any second shots or Gaze of Stones. So Eaten Alive kills this puppy that came to attack me. Here I spot a window of opportunity again. So I used Day Remembered to boost. Hindsight, as in I was afraid that if I managed to get here and I use a Day Remembered, as Medusa, she would have just fainted and all the other attacks would have been dead. But I didn't have worried actually because I did have a feint in hand and another Eaten Alive. So anyway, got there. First thing was the Clever Girl, which was his and slithered away, annoyingly. So I was thinking between damage or ambush, and I discarded ambush. And I think this was where I actually made quite a serious error. Medusa has some pretty solid high boost cards, so stuff like his and slither, momentary glances, even the second shots, those were worth 3 boosts. So I hit her again with Eviscerate for another 2 points of damage. And yeah, I thought I still had a pretty good chance, but it could have been much closer if I had used an ambush. So this was where my mistakes continued. On her turn, Medusa attacked me, and I first defended it with an Eaten Alive. So even though I had a feint in hand. So naturally you would want to defend with a feint because Eaten Alive would be bad against a second shot. Because you wouldn't, it's very likely that you lose the combat. Although you take less damage, but still, a feint would have totally cancelled that out. So the opponent boosts the second shot with another second shot. So 3 points of damage to me. And then he tried another Gaze of Stone, but it was a feint. So you see, I should have actually feinted first to remove that second shot. And then for my second attack, I do this instead, the Eaten Alive, and that will allow me to actually deal a point of damage to Medusa. So my turn, fight Hunters for a little bit more damage, down to 3. And I had to run. So I was considering where to run actually. So Medusa on Norton, 2 bad Harpies, and we're both trying to. There comes another lull in the game where they're trying to draw back up to 7. Some minor skirmishes here. So at this point in the game, I still think Medusa has an advantage because as long as she surrounds herself with the Harpies, it will be very difficult for me to actually finish her off. Considering that she could still call back her Harpies one more time. So she killed this Raptor with a feint. I was considering whether to just defend it with this feint, and I think that should have actually been the correct call. But I wanted to keep it as a defense. And here comes the last puzzle of the game where how was I going to deal the last 3 points of damage to Medusa? So I actually use disengage to boost myself against this Harpy. And with an ambush, I knocked out one Hiss and Slither from Medusa's hand. On Medusa's turn, she deals she glances momentarily at me and along with auto damage, puts me at 1 hit point. So this game is really very close. And it was do or die basically. So interestingly, she does a regroup, as in use a regroup to boost her way out of there. And I actually think Medusa still an advantage. Just keep the Harpies alive. Hopefully draw into that allow her to bring her back. Bring back the Harpies and just wait me out. While I just try to clear out a Harpy or two. Here we are, just drawing out cards. Me trying to find an angle where I can attack. And this is where I found my last vector of attack. The last card, which meant that this was basically the last turn for me because I only had 1 hit point left. I simply just discarded decoy to move 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. And threw down. Naturally, I would throw down a Clever Girl first because Medusa didn't have any more paints at this point in time. And critically, she didn't have a dash also. And put an ambush. And ambush actually put Gaze of Stone. So this meant that I narrowly just won the game. But 2 plus 4, 6 points. 6 points minus 3. 3 points went through. But honestly, if I put any other card, because this was the only way I could win the game at this point in time, it was pure luck. If I put just a card with lesser boost value, or if Medusa defended with the one last hiss and slither, I wouldn't have been able to deal enough damage to her. Alright? And it was just by pure luck that his slither was still in the deck. And Medusa's hand was just a regroup. So Yeah, this was a very interesting game. I had good ideas in the start, had issues with execution, made a couple of questionable choices, so I retreated when I should have attacked in some cases, and only through sheer luck won at the end. So I think the key for Raptors is that more often than not, you just gotta really play your hand and adapt to the situation. So in my view, games with the Raptors tend to have a very clear couple of stages. So the first phase is where you try to deal as much damage as possible before slinking away. So by the time you slink away, one Raptor is usually dead at this point in time. And then it's up to some Raptor scheming, using decoys or boosted maneuvering to deal as much damage as possible again before the next Raptor is killed. So the last phase should hopefully become quite scrappy at this point in time. Last surviving Raptor and a severely wounded prey in a desperate low card struggle just duking it out. So I think how successful the Raptors will often be decided by how much damage they do in the first phase, so the first part of the game. It's the most important indicator, I think. Lurking too long and trying to build the perfect combo hand, as the Raptors is a trap too, I think. And overdrawing should be avoided for the Raptors as much as possible, as you really can't afford to have the opponent have so much room that they can use their versatile cards for offense. Other small tips for me to keep in mind for the future is that feints are very important as defense against Medusa. Attacks are not inherently very huge, except for a second shot, and feints will help to defend against that. And the other thing is that whenever you see a decoy and a card such as coordinated attack pattern hand, that's always a good combo potential. Alright, that's it for today's after action report. See you in the next one.